Welcome to Expressions of Leadership. I'm your host, Michele Kawamoto Perry. In every episode, we explore how people from educators and artists to executives and entrepreneurs lead with authenticity, rise through adversity, and share the wisdom they've gained along the way. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible canine behavior specialists, Shakina Brzezinski and Molly Leevan. Shakina and Molly are the co-founders of Wunderdogs, and between them, they bring decades of experience in working with animals and humans through guidance, patience, and connection. From their early days training horses to leading dog behavior programs rooted in positive reinforcement, these two are quietly challenging old school paradigms with science, compassion, and a whole lot of care. Molly and Shakinah, it's great to have you here on Expressions of Leadership.
Thank you for having us. We're so excited.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's start with the roots of your work. What first drew you to working with animals?
Well, I grew up in Montana, and so I grew up always being in the barn. That's where you could find me. And so it was just really natural. I got my first job at 14 working with a horse trainer, and then I just never left.
I have kind of the opposite where I grew up more in the city in LA and I got into doing horses and everything because it was a way to get out of the city and do something a little bit different. So kind of from there, the same idea. Once you get started, you kind of never leave and you just start learning a lot from the animals themselves. So it's a really great and rewarding type of thing to be a part of.
And both of you, as you said, began in the horse world. What did that space teach you about communication, leadership, and power dynamics?
I think just dealing with horses, it's such a big animal. And I know for both of us starting very young, when you're like a very young girl and then you can control this giant animal, it's a really amazing thing where it's a different type of relationship dynamic than you're used to. So I think that in itself is really just empowering and it kind of is very exciting when you're young and it's a very fun type of world to be a part of and interact with very large animals that are so gentle.
I fully agree. I think that one of the things I learned most was that if I freaked out, the horse was going to freak out. Or if the horse was already freaking out and I lost my cool, then we were both ending up in the fence or in the bushes. And then if I stayed calm, even if the horse was freaking out, I could then calm both of us down and make sure that we both then stayed inside of the arena or didn't take off across the field. And I think that kind of sense of, okay, the horse is bucking, but I can kind of take a really deep breath and I can center myself and kind of take control and go, oh, everything's okay, and then we can be all right. I think that was really huge for me with interacting with everything and everyone, actually.
It sounds like a real reflective process. And dogs, not unlike humans, respond to how you say something, how you react to something, maybe the energy that you're giving off.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting thing is how we affect the animals that we're around, how we give off an energy that they feed off of. If you even look at like pack dynamics, that's very much how they all respond to each other. If it's a pack of dogs, a herd of horses, if one lookout animal starts panicking, they sense that and they all know to panic. Same if they're all calm, they're all reading that energy and being calm. So if you're in a sense their leader and you're maybe that lookout animal for them, they're going to sense your energy. They're going to see, if we're calm and relaxed, they're going to have to kind of follow through with that energy. Even with dealing with puppies, a lot of like the excitement they kind of learn and get the extra exciting levels is because we're like that and they think it's super fun and exciting. So that's something that you do have to kind of ingrain in people a little bit is that you are a reflection of your dog and your dog is a reflection of you. And a lot of times you see when sometimes people are a little chaotic, their dog's a little chaotic, or they're pretty calm and relaxed, their dog tends to be as well. So the mirroring is a very important part of interacting with animals.
And how did you transition into dog training?
Well, I think for me, it came pretty naturally when I moved out to LA, because there's obviously quite a bit of the horse world here, but they're a little bit further drive out of the city. And I wanted to be able to start working with with people as well, because I've definitely always had a passion for just creating connections and building those relationships. And so I wanted to step into that world a little bit.
Yeah, I think for my transition, it was kind of a natural flow from horses into dogs because a lot of people in the horse world have dogs. There's, barn dogs, clients that, of course, have horses, but then they have dogs at home. You start doing some pet sitting or kind of watching people's dogs, then you get into a little bit more of, oh, could I actually do this and apply some of what I'm learning with horses into dogs? A really interesting aspect for me as well with horses, it's a little bit more old school in the sense of control, leadership. It is a little bit more aversive at times. So as I was learning more when I was younger and maybe not as aligned with the mentors that I had in the horse world, I was figuring out there are better ways to do things, but didn't really have that access to try it because it's other people's horses, you're working for somebody. So, kind of going on that line of getting more into positive reinforcement, that was really appealing for kind of starting with dogs, that it was a little more ahead of the time. So, that was a very natural transition.
And speaking of that, there's this real fierce debate around this positive reinforcement or force-free versus adversive methods of training. How did each of you come to embrace that positive reinforcement approach?
Well, when I moved out here to LA, I started out at Zoom Room actually, and they are a positive reinforcement dog training corporate facility. So I got some more introduction into kind of the scientific realm of that, and just kind of dipped my toes in there, and that was fascinating. And then I really took it from there and dove head first. I was like, oh my goodness, I love this. And then I began attending lectures and signing up for master classes and taking all of these courses from other behavioral scientists and dog trainers, and just learning everything and anything that I could about the way that not only dogs learn and interact with their humans in their daily life, but also really the physiology of it as well, because I find it absolutely fascinating, to better understand the way that they function with us on a daily basis. And I think that that's what has really kept me in the positive reinforcement realm as well, is the love of science of it and looking at the actual brain chemistry that can be affected and really developed through those tools. Whereas with the aversive methods, you're really working more with the behavior instead of the physiology of it, of actually changing the animal's own choices and approach, and giving them that option of, okay, let's help you actually feel better about this scenario, not just change that you are no longer barking at the scary thing, but actually help you feel comfortable with the scary thing.
Yeah, I think that's the super important kind of distinguisher is with more aversive training. Sometimes it's just tackling the behavior itself. And in a way, it is appealing. I do understand why so many people do it and kind of preach for that. It's because it is very quick effective. You're getting something, my dog's barking, now they're not. But in that, you're not really paying attention to what their mind is actually saying, what the feeling behind it, what's the cause of the actual behavior. So you're not stopping it long term and actually helping their mental state. You're just kind of stopping that symptom of, oh, they're barking. That's the symptom of how they're actually feeling. So it is quick, effective. People like that. It's very appealing when they see, my dog was doing this thing and then it stopped. But the part that they don't see is that they're kind of diminishing the relationship that they do have with their dog. And in turn, the behavior could result in doing something else entirely, where the barking stopped, but now they're going to chew up your rug because they're frustrated, they're suppressed, they're not getting to express themselves in that way. So you might have one problem solved, and then you're going to see another problem, or your dog is going to start showing more signs of anxiety in another form. So I find getting to the root of the problems, like Shakinah was saying, a lot more of the scientific understanding of where their brain is, their mind is, they're a sentient being the same way that we are. That's going to get you to the long term understanding of the goals and solving the problem. Yes, it takes longer. There's more time that the owner has to put in. That's why it's a little bit harder for people to get behind right away. But once they see it, and of course we see it, that's why we stick with it, we believe it, is because when we see that long term effect, it's a lot better for the dog and the person.
And what are the differences in the results that you see in relationships between dogs and their owners when they do engage in positive reinforcement trainings?
I think you said team building. I mean, I know we both see it in different ways, but team building, you're building behaviors that your dog wants to do. They're going to choose to do those. And then a lot of it turns into like automatic behaviors where the dog starts doing it on their own. They're like, I'm going to run into my crate on my own because I know that's awesome. You get a dog that wants to do things for you, which is so awesome. I love that.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that has always stuck out in my mind is whenever I work with somebody who has previously done quite a bit of aversive training with their dog, and then we do work together. Um, I've even had a dog where the client goes, "Oh my gosh, he's not scared of you. He was always terrified of our other trainer." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that breaks my heart." It's supposed to be a relationship building exercise. It's supposed to be something fun and that you enjoy because you're spending time with your dog and you are investing in this family member that you love. And so I think one of the biggest differences I find is actually enjoying the training and being excited to do it. And that goes for the person, but also the dog too.
I see that a lot as well, where the person tells me, like, oh, wow, that just makes so much sense. Or, I worked with another trainer that told me to do this, and I was so confused and it didn't make sense. And I think because it makes sense naturally about how your dog is thinking and it's explained in a way that makes a lot of sense. I see that so much as well, where people are like, wow, this is actually fun. Training doesn't have to be super strict, scary. You have to be very specific on how you do things. You can just have fun with it. Make it a part of your daily routine where you and your dog have fun together and understand each other.
And I love how you said it's an investment in a family member. So thinking about that time that you are training with your dog, even outside of a training session, as a bonding moment.
No, it absolutely is. I mean, if you are not invested in your dog, then why on earth are you spending all of this time and money and energy trying to help them feel more comfortable in your life? Because that's essentially all that you're doing, really, in any sort of training, even if it's just puppy potty training. You're still trying to help them feel comfortable and know how to live well with you.
Well, we're just getting started with Shakina and Molly, discussing the nuances of leadership through relationship, not force. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. We'd love for you to be a part of the Expressions of Leadership community. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. Welcome back to Expressions of Leadership. I'm here with Shakina Brzezinski and Molly Leevan, co-founders of Wunderdogs, and we're talking about influence, empathy, and building safe spaces for dogs and people alike. You've both mentioned how dogs sense how their people are feeling. What do you observe about that emotional mirroring, and how does it influence the way that you guide your clients?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that we can't go into a training session expecting every single training session to be the same. Every set of dog and owner relationship is different. And so that's what our training plan has to be as well. And I think that especially when we're looking at the mirroring of it, if I'm going into a reactivity program, I know that I'm not just going to be working with a dog who is very stressed, but I'm also going to be working with a person who's very stressed as well. And if I'm going into an anxiety program where the dog is terrified of going outside and they have separation anxiety and they probably have a few other phobias or obsessive behaviors as well, I know that I'm probably going to be dealing with a human who's been through a lot with their dog and has taken on quite a bit of that anxiety as well. And it's really interesting looking at how much of it is these dogs and people are going through the same experience. So they both have anxiety because of all of the behavioral problems that are going on and the circumstances they're in. But there's also a running joke in the dog world that if you get a dog for your anxiety, you are going to end up with a dog who has anxiety. And it's just one of those funny phenomenons.
I definitely see that a lot too, where you have anxious person, anxious dog. They both mirror each other. Another kind of funny dog training trope that I know at least the both of us get a lot is my dog is always so good when you are here. And I think that speaks volumes, where I think a lot of times when people are trying to do these things and work on these behaviors on their own, they have a lot of previous stress and anxiety from, or sometimes not having the direction to know, what to do in that moment. My dog's reacting. What do I do? They start getting panicked, and I think that makes it worse in the situation. So I do really try and prepare people for those moments, and then I find when I do, experience those with them, I just calmly walk them through what to do, and it de-escalates things a lot faster. Or sometimes we have a dog we're working on reactivity and they're like, oh, they're going to react at this and this and this. And then when I'm there, they don't. And I've heard owners say it's because I feel that confidence of, you're here, you're going to tell me what to do, help me walk through those situations. So I think bringing in that calm energy, like you were mentioning, Shekinah, to those situations that you're coming in where an owner stressed and maybe even a little reactive themselves because their dog is, being kind of that anchor to kind of help them through those moments. I think that in itself explains the my dog is always so good when you're here, because I get that all the time. They're like, but you're not seeing the actual reactivity. And I'm going, that's actually a good thing. I believe you. I know they're reactive, but it's a good thing that we're not experiencing it when we're working on the training. That's the whole idea, is to keep things calm and structured and working on building positive experiences.
I can't tell you how many times I have been in a session, particularly a first session with people where their dog might be barking out the window, and then I help them disengage really quickly by just using a secondary noise or asking for a touch, and they do it immediately. And the look of like awe and confusion in people's faces is one of my absolute favorite things, when their dog is able to do something that they never previously thought possible.
Well, what are some outdated assumptions that people still have about dogs and their behavior that you're working to actively change?
Definitely, we talked about kind of the aversive versus positive reinforcement. I think with that comes this idea of dominance building. I think there is a level of that that can be somewhat accurate with how dogs' pack mentality works. But as far as becoming the dominant human over the dog, or even dogs that live in the same house, sometimes people are trying to make one the more dominant dog. And I think I personally don't see that work all that well. I kind of say, if you want to believe it, that's totally okay. You can, be that dominant kind of pack leader. That's almost like the Caesar Milan type of be the pack leader. You want to be the leader, but you want to also be a listener when you're the leader. And I think that's what people are forgetting, is that being a dominant leader doesn't mean you're not paying attention to your dog. You're not actually listening to the things that they are telling you and communicating to you. I think with that as well is this idea of my dog is so stubborn. Um, I hear that a lot. They're so stubborn. They're doing this and that out of spite. Dogs don't really feel that level of spite of, I woke up today and I chose to disobey. And I think some people take it personally, like, my dog knows this, but they're not doing it right now. And I try and explain there's a reason they're not doing it right now. I'll have a client say, I bring out my harness and my dog is being stubborn. They go hide under the table. They don't want to go on a walk. And there's more to that. There's, maybe your dog doesn't like the harness being put on. Maybe they're in a little bit of pain when you put it on. Maybe they're a little bit scared. So they're hiding for the actual harness being put on, but they probably do want to go on a walk. So going and telling them to, like, come towards you is not going to work in that moment, because you're handling fear versus a lack of respect. So there's a very different mentality there that I think some people get a little caught up in and take it personally when their dog doesn't listen. But I think I encourage everybody to take a look at their dog and go, why might they not be doing what I want them to do? It's not about me, it's more about them.
Listening is such a critical skill in leadership. It's about observing and noticing the nuances behind what's not being said. And as dog trainers, that's especially powerful because you're constantly listening to both the dogs and humans.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that I do as far as educating throughout any sort of training program is helping somebody learn how to read their own dog's body language, because that is how dogs communicate. We communicate verbally through our words, and so we are bridging a language barrier by learning an entirely new language of body language. And I think that that's one of the realms that starting out with horses really helped me with. Because we would, be lunging a horse, and that's when, like, the horse is on a really long line and they're going around you in a circle, and you learn how to take a horse from a canter or a gallop down to a walk with just your breathing and your body language. And that is then something that I try and translate to dogs, where I'm going, all right, let's watch your dog's body language right now. They can see that dog that's 50 feet away. Do you see the way that their ears start to change, that their neck lengthens because all of their muscles are getting really tense, and they, change all their muscles, and everything gets really stiff, and their tail goes way up, and then it starts to vibrate. And all of that happens before your dog ever makes a peep. And that's your dog cueing for you to help them through a scenario where they're starting to have big feelings. So I think teaching our clients to listen to their own dogs without using any words is a pretty magical thing to get to see coming about, where especially in our Spicy Dogs Club, we start seeing people really taking that on of their own volition as well, where I see my clients, I see them doing it and they're able to help their dog through a reactive dog class where there's, four other spicy pups and they're watching their dog and they're like, all right, you're getting big feelings. All right, let's move a little bit further away. Okay, you're doing really great. Let's move closer to the trigger. And it's really wonderful to see.
You both talk about being like kindergarten teachers versus the hard teachers. What does that distinction mean to you when it comes to leadership style in the context of your work?
I think that's definitely a very interesting way to put like teaching in general. But I think especially with dogs, most people aren't dog trainers. They're not the one teaching their dog high school level stuff when they haven't learned the ABCs. So we have to come in and teach them the ABCs because we're not expecting them to do everything perfectly from the get go. I think some people do have that expectation of my dog needs to do this, this, and this, but your dog can't write an essay yet. They need to learn those ABCs. So when we come in, I think that kind of kindergarten mentality is there is room for mistakes because we know they're just learning. Mistakes are okay. Mistakes are room for growth. So being in that mindset of we are here to help you learn and understand how to do something so then you can make those decisions more on your own, for the dog and the person. I think what Shakinah was even mentioning, the explaining to the person, they're still learning their ABCs too with dog training. We're the dog trainers, they aren't. So we're teaching both their dog the skills, but we're teaching the owner as well. And there's room for that growth and mistakes to happen that some people get a little discouraged by, but it's understanding what those little signals are, their body language, the fundamentals of those skills before they can fully go out on their own, be around other dogs. Any skill doesn't always have to be reactivity, just my dog is learning how to do a down. I can sometimes get their dog to lay down because I know exactly how to move my hand, how to get the dog to follow the treat. So it's just going through and walking the person through how to do it because I can do it, but you're going to be the one with your dog every single day. You need to also learn how to do it. So we're both in part kindergarten teachers for your dog and you as well because it's a lower level of learning something that is so vast and there's so much out there. So it's just guiding that process in a way that gives you that room to, understand and be patient and help people learn and open that up for learning.
Well, let's take a brief pause. And when we return, we'll talk about the ways leadership shows up in systems and decision making, and how Molly and Shakinah are building a new kind of training community. By partnering with Expressions of Leadership, you'll reach an audience of professionals passionate about leadership and growth. For sponsorship opportunities, please contact us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com. You're listening to Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry, and I'm back with Molly Leevan and Shakina Brzezinski. We're diving into leadership in the workplace and how Wunderdogs is creating a space for clients, dogs, and trainers to thrive together. Now, I believe that work cultures reflect the leaders within them. How do you see leadership culture impacting the way teams operate on the corporate side of the pet care world?
So I think that in the corporate world, the focus is more so on the business aspect, which makes sense. They're business people. But for dog training specifically, the focus is on the dogs and the people, or at least it should be. And so I think that it is definitely a struggle that I've seen where you're trying to pair those two together. And I think that it's possible, but it's definitely quite tough to have those two things actually mesh.
I think to kind of add to that, we both have had that experience of working for a dog training company where it is more about like profit. It's about building clients and just return customers, which is still, you want to make it a good experience. But one of the biggest differences with something like that is our appointments would have to end, exactly 30 minutes or exactly 50 minutes. It's a little impossible at times because you're working on something specific, you're working through something, and then, oh, time's up. I feel like that sometimes doesn't add to the experience for the owner or the dog, where they're not fully getting to the point of a success to finish up. So, working with animals and people, like, you do have to have that time to fully explain, make sure they understand, versus, oh, we got to cut off the time here, on to the next person that's waiting right outside. That's one of the things I love so much about getting to be on my own and run things the way that I would like to be treated as well. So I think that's a very big role in running things in a way that's a little less corporatized.
So, what was that turning point that pushed you to create Wunderdogs?
Well, I actually had some big changes happen in my personal life, and it made me really prioritize what I wanted to be doing for my career, and kind of gave me that little nudge to step out on my own. And so as I started to do that, I knew that I wanted to focus on leading and creating a community that prioritized patience and flexibility and the care and compassion in working with people and dogs, and really, really focusing on that aspect of it. And so I did quite a bit of market research, and I reached out to quite a few private dog trainers and found out what that world looked like, and started building a community of amazing pet professionals, and getting to learn from them, or even just have people alongside me that I can go, all right, cool, we're in it together, because that makes a world of difference. And then I was lucky enough that the timing worked out for Molly to come with me.
Yeah, Shakina kind of made that first leap of faith. We were working at the same place. We were working at Zoom Room together, and we had already talked about working together. And, you can say everything that you dislike about a company, or, things in your day to day that you're like, oh, that's annoying. That kind of sucks. We could do it better. But then to actually go and do that, that's scary. That's really hard. So, kind of leaving a little bit of that stability, leaving that comfort of, I know I'm going to have clients here, to
Mhm.
starting at zero and building something. So, that's something where I was happy to do it with Shekinah and be able to have that of, like, I'm not doing it alone. Doing it with somebody makes it so much easier at first, but also super rewarding that you guys, like, we can be together and build that community like Shekinah was talking about, of people and dogs and dog professionals. So it's been really rewarding.
And what does it mean to design a training space that feels safe and responsive for both dogs and people?
It really focuses on a lot of that flexibility, where we are meeting every client and dog exactly where they're at, and not expecting them to be anything else, just coming to them and educating them in their learning style, and figuring out how to communicate with that person in particular, because that is definitely a big part of it as well, because not all people communicate the same either. And so that was actually a really big learning curve for me, stepping out into that private dog training world, where there was more of that focus in that individual relationship. And then really tailoring the training plan to the dog's pace and to the person's pace as well, and not ever meeting them with any judgment of, oh, you didn't do your homework this week. It's, no, that makes perfect sense. You have 4 kids and a full-time job, and you have this dog that you are trying to help. It's okay that you didn't get a chance to practice anything this week. Let's focus on doing 5 minutes here, and then we'll meet next week. And I give very different homework to the different people based on their lifestyles, not just based on their dogs, to try and make sure that it is a attainable goal and something that we're setting them up for success with.
And along with creating that safe space, you developed a program called Spicy Dogs. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So, Spicy Dogs Club is my passion project. I actually have a reactive dog myself, and he was part of why I created this. I loved working with reactive dogs and their owners, but I found that there was this hole that a lot of my clients were falling into where we would finish a private program. They were ready to start training and working around other dogs, but an obedience class setting was too much for them, and it was much too hard. And it was much too hard for my own dog. I actually tried taking a class with Molly one time with him, and it was a hot mess. um, so I started reaching out to my clients that had reactive dogs, my other trainers and friends that had reactive dogs. I was like, you know what, let's start working together on this, because one of the hardest parts in working with a reactive dog as a handler and an owner is that there's a lot of shame and judgment that you feel when your dog starts barking and lunging at another dog in public. It is very anxiety invoking. And I wanted to create a space where it was okay that they did that, where we all knew and expected that these spicy dogs were probably going to feel a little spicy. They were going to have some big feelings. And so we started meeting and getting together and all working together. And it has been absolutely incredible. We have seen dogs who were never able to interact with other dogs before, off leash or on leash, they now have dog friends. They have best buddies. They are able to go to dog parks or have play dates and go on hikes. A few of them have actually been certified as service dogs and flown on airplanes. And so it's absolutely amazing seeing these dogs being able to live a fulfilling life with their owners, and their owners getting to have a life with their dog that they never thought possible. Even if it's as simple as being able to go out on your regular walks with your dog without holding your breath at every single corner and being terrified that you're going to run into something and your dog is going to lose it. And so that is my Spicy Dogs Club.
We've been hearing from Shakina and Molly from Wunderdogs about the ways they're reimagining leadership in training. Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll dive into connection, trust, and some unexpected leadership lessons. Stay with us. True transformation starts from within. The Forward Project partners with organizations to create meaningful culture shifts and develop leaders who inspire real change. If your team is ready to move forward with purpose, visit www.theforwardproject.co. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry. Let's rejoin Shakina Brzezinski and Molly Leevan to explore what dogs and their people can teach us about trust and growth. What does it look like when a dog owner starts to shift from controlling their dog to leading with connection and understanding?
I think this one is kind of an interesting question because some people think they have control over their dog, but they don't actually, or they're thinking that there is some type of control through their command. So that's where you get a lot of people, you might hear somebody calling after their dog uh, like biscuit, 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 like over and over, like as if their dog is gonna respond. So I think there is that idea of control that some people think if I just repeat things, they're gonna listen, or if I'm stern, they're gonna just listen. Um, but I find what's really interesting for people to discover is that actually less can be so much more. That if you do put in that work and there is a reward history where your dog is like, hey, every time I hear my name, I'm going to get something really great from you, then all you have to do is say it one time and you do actually have that control. So there's a line of something that hasn't been practiced, but if you say it so many times, I have that control. But then when people realize if you put in a little bit of work and all you need to do now is that little piece where I just say it once, or I even do a little body language type of signal, my dog is going to respond a lot more effectively. So I think some people do more thinking that they have control, but if you put in a little bit of work and training, you can do a lot less and you have so much more control, which I think kind of shocks people when they're like, whoa, that works. It's actually a sense of control.
And can you share a moment when a dog or a client taught you something unexpected about leadership?
I think I think for me it would be learning to learning to let control go for myself. Like Molly has touched on, um, we have to let go of a little bit of control in taking the reins ourselves because we can do it. We can have that dog going to a heel position nice and easily, or we can help that dog through a tough or scary situation. But that's not of much use when we're not with the dogs 24/7. It's the owner. And so I have had to learn how to take a little step back and let them struggle a little bit as they learn and guide them through that. And then that reward is just so much more valuable.
It's really letting go to allow the client to lead.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you notice about the emotional intelligence of dogs, and how does that shape your communication with them and their humans?
Well, dogs are very emotionally intelligent, but they also are so much more aware of our nervous systems than we are most of the time. Because dogs can smell cortisol, that stress hormone that goes through our bodies anytime that we start to get more stressed or anxious. And so they know on a very physical level when something is wrong. And that can um, create some very interesting dynamics where maybe we're working with a dog who has a bite history and he's bitten one of the family members. And now that family member is scared of the dog, rightfully so, because it's terrifying to be bitten by somebody that you know and love and you had trusted, and now all that trust is gone. So that person's now very scared approaching that dog, and that dog can tell that that person's scared, so it makes them more scared, and then we're dealing with those two emotions kind of feeding off of one another. And so it's all about helping build up the dog's confidence with that, but also the person's as well, and explaining it to them in the kindest way possible, where they understand that what they're feeling is very normal and that they don't have to worry about their own stress causing any sort of regression in the training either, because dogs can't control their emotions and we can't control ours.
In general, I think people sometimes don't think about their dog as a dog, and they do anthropomorphize their dog, which is just putting human thought and understanding onto their dog, where they have a different type of rationale and emotional intelligence that sometimes we don't take the time to understand. And I think that's where most people get kind of that lack of communication, where they're going, my dog is thinking this, when actually they're thinking something entirely different. So I think that can be a side of, some people put human emotions and intelligence on their dog, not realizing their own dog has a very different level of thought and understanding. They're very smart and they do have emotional intelligence, but it might be a little bit different from ours. So it comes to their needs, their thoughts, rather than us putting our needs and our thoughts onto our dog. So yeah.
And now, trust and building trust is a critical aspect of leadership. What role does trust play in your training process, and how do you rebuild it when it's broken?
Well, I think trust is vital. People are trusting us when they hire us to help them. They're trusting that we are able to help them and that it's going to be a good experience for them. And we are also trusting them to do their homework and um, to listen to us as we are trying to help them through this process. When it comes to building of trust, I think one of the simplest ways that we do it is when we first meet a dog, structuring that interaction so that we are not intimidating to them and that we take it really nice and slow. Anytime that I meet a client dog for the first time, if we're doing an in-home session, I have them bring that dog out to the sidewalk and we can do a greeting there and then go on up. And if it's a super shy dog, I don't force them to interact with me. That's perfectly fine. I will ignore that dog. I will not give them eye contact. And I think that that's a very important aspect of trust, is that, of course, it's very cliche, but it is earned. It is. And it cannot be forced. So just because I am there to work with the dog, if they are terrified of me, that's okay. That's what we're going to work on. I'm not going to force them to interact with me. I'm not going to force them to try and trust me. So rebuilding it when it's been broken really focuses on creating those positive associations again for both the person and the dog. So if we kind of go back to the example that I had mentioned earlier of a family member getting bitten by their own dog, what I normally do is, one, I give them a relationship building exercise where it's very simple. They don't have to put their hands anywhere near the dog because that's usually pretty scary. They can drop the treats on the floor, and we just start building up for the dog and the person. Interacting in very short, simple ways is a really good thing. And then what I also do is I usually prescribe a little bit of play, and it can be any version of that, but finding ways to help release serotonin in the dog's brain and in the human's brain is a very simple and effective way to help both of them start feeling more comfortable together.
I think as well with trust, when there's that loss of trust between maybe a dog and an owner, um, a lot of it is rebuilding good patterns, where dogs are very good at patterns. They really like patterns. They like to follow a pattern. They're very good at recognizing it. But when you have that loss or break in trust and they're scared, they're working off of that fear. You're just managing that fear, where you need to create good new patterns that do build that trust back up. Where when you are talking about a situation like a bite, it's somebody, the person themselves, they're losing the trust and the dog is losing that trust. But even with a situation like separation anxiety, something like that, where the dog is super anxious because they know a specific pattern is happening, that can break that trust in a way, or making them feel more anxious if something isn't predictable. You have to kind of change that, create a new pattern to build that trust. Or if it has never even existed before, where a dog has never had trust with you leaving and then knowing that you're going to come back, I think that's a really interesting way of kind of putting it, of whether you're rebuilding trust or just creating trust from where it's never been before. It's a lot of that slow, consistent pattern building to show the dog you are going to come back. You're building that response that they're going to start to understand and feel more comfort with. So I think that's really where the trust building happens, is that slow, consistent pattern building.
Trust, reflection, and responsive leadership. There's so much to take away from what Molly and Shakinah have shared. After this break, we'll talk about their vision for Wunderdogs, how to stay connected, and wrap up with our wisdom and whimsy segment. Don't miss a thing. Follow Expressions of Leadership on your favorite podcast app and connect with us on Instagram and YouTube at Expressions of Leadership. This is Expressions of Leadership. I'm Michele Kawamoto Perry. Let's get back to Shakina Brzezinski and Molly Leevan to talk about what's next for Wunderdogs. What's your vision for Wunderdogs, and how do you hope it changes the culture around training, leadership, and connection?
Well, we are currently partnering with quite a few other trainers in the area, working on expanding Spicy Dogs Club. My goal is for it to be at least an LA-wide club for reactive dog owners, where it can be a large community, not only for learning and training purposes, but also for that connection, and creating friendships. And I am actually also partnering with a couple of other small businesses as well, to create a lecture series and move into some of the educational realm as well. And I would love to continue doing that and building up that entire community, not only of dog owners, but also of pet professionals, where it can be small businesses building each other up.
And where can listeners go to learn more about your work and get involved with the Wunderdogs community?
Well, you can find us on Instagram at Wunder Dog Training, and you can also find our website for pricing, services, and booking a free consultation with us, at www.wunderdogtrainers.com.
And that's spelled Wunderdogs, correct?
Correct.
Great. And now for the wisdom and whimsy segment of our show. Let's start out with the advice question. What's one piece of advice that you'd offer to someone who's trying to lead with kindness in a system that still rewards control?
That's definitely a tougher question, because when you feel like you're in a system of control, it's a lot harder to take control or present control in your own way. But I think the biggest thing to do, and what I do personally, is a lot of listening and observing and seeing what's needed. What do I need to do? How do I better understand this person? How to work with them more effectively? I think that's a super important element that not enough people do and take in, is what's going on around them, and figure out how to help people out where they need it, where you can take charge in little ways, where it doesn't have to be something that you are fully in control of. You don't have to be in control of the company, but maybe just the people you work with. You listen, you try and help them in little ways, you try and be a leader to them in a way that's not super conventional, but you're leading them in a way that helps them with their day to day, making it easier. Working together better makes it easier for everybody.
Yeah, and I think, if you're trying to lead with kindness and compassion, it's really important to remember to give those things to yourself as well, because that can very easily get lost, especially if you are surrounded by other people who are not valuing those same things. The other thing I would say is to find your people, because that makes such a world of difference.
And now for the fun question. If your leadership style were a dog breed, what would it be and why?
Well, mine would definitely be a Newfoundland. Um, my dog Wunder, who the company is named after, was a Newfoundland, and he was the biggest, sweetest teddy bear, but was also a really, really great working dog, and was just absolutely fantastic. And the Newfoundland breed was actually bred to be rescue workers in the northern seas. So they are very sneakily determined and amazing dogs.
I think I would be potentially a giant schnauzer. I did grow up with a smaller schnauzer, um, but I think they're very smart, intelligent dogs. They do tend to be more of a guard dog. So some people do have difficulty with them now, but I think some of that is their bravery, which I think is a trait that I'm working on in general. So I kind of want to embody that, have that bravery while still being intelligent and tactful and smart. So I definitely think they're adorable dogs, but they also have a lot of great characteristics about them.
Well, Shakina and Molly, thank you so much for joining us on Expressions of Leadership. And thank you for all the work that you're doing and for bringing such heart and intention to your leadership. You've given us so much to think about, not just as trainers or pet owners, but as people leading in all areas of our lives.
Thank you so much for having us. We've enjoyed being on your show so much.
Absolutely. It was so lovely chatting with you.
And thank you to our listeners for being here. I hope what you heard today sparks your own reflections on how we lead, how we connect, and how we influence the spaces we're part of, whether with people or with pups. Until next time, take good care and keep leading with intention. If you haven't done so already, make sure to click on that follow button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Have a guest you'd like us to interview? Questions, ideas, or just want to say hello, you can reach us at letstalk@expressionsofleadership.com or connect with us on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks to our amazing team behind the scenes for making this podcast possible, including our sound engineer, Graham Palmer, and my chief encourager and advisor, Jeremiah Higgins.